Welcome to Beatsource Tech. My name is Mojaxx and today we're looking at a product which has the potential to fill the compact isolator shaped hole in my life, the ISO4 from Mastersounds. I've currently got two new Mastersounds products in the lab on review. There's the Radius 4 Mark II mixer, which will be getting its own video soon. One of the big changes on that from the older version is the switch to a horizontally oriented isolator, switchable between 3- and 4-way operation. And then we have this, the ISO4, which is basically that same isolator, but in the form of a standalone unit. Let's talk a little bit about isolators more generally. I realised whilst making this video that there's a gap in my knowledge. I know that in the Paradise Garage, for example, Larry Levan would use an actual crossover, cutting and boosting specific parts of the sound system. Remember that DJ mixers at the time didn't feature per channel EQs like they do now. There was no other way to mess with frequencies. But I don't know how we got from there to the kinds of isolators we see today, which are more like a master EQ. I remember seeing photos of booths like the Sound Factory in the 90s, where I would see isolators like those made by Richard Long or Gary Stewart, but I don't know how that transition started or who made the first isolator. So please, if you know the answer, educate me in the comments. For a while, those rack units like the GSA were the only option, designed as they were to sit in a console with a mixer like a Yuri 1620. But then in the late 90s, Vestax released some isolators which had a more compact design. I fully lusted after the FDG1 back in the day. But still, most isolators were 1U rack units. Some years ago, I reviewed the Omnitronic ISO22, which is still pretty impressive as a super budget option. And for a while, I owned a Mojaxx ISO4, which, like the Mastersounds, is switchable between 3 and 4 band. I loved that Mojaxx, but it was huge, and I'm just not a rack kind of guy. So I've long been on the lookout for an isolator which was more portable, something I could easily put in a bag and take to gigs with me. There have been two main options on the market of late, the Beatsource ISO201, which I looked at in my first ever video about rotaries, and the desktop isolator from MC Audio Solutions. I know from experience that the Beatsource rocks, and Louis Vega has been using the MC Audio Solutions one, so I'm sure that's also great. But I had one issue with both: they use unbalanced RCA connections. That's all good in a home setup, or if you're using them as an insert, or in a send and return loop, but the one thing I've always wanted to do is feed the balanced output of the mixer, controller, or all-in-one I'm using into the isolator and then onto the house system. That way I can use it with any booth setup I encounter, and for that I need balanced connections. Enter the Mastersounds ISO4. We'll talk connections first then. The ISO4 has balanced XLR ins and outs as well as unbalanced RCAs, and even a pair of jacks to use it with the insert loops on Mastersounds or similar mixers. So the flexibility is unparalleled in this space. There is one possible downside to having all that connectivity, however. Whereas the competition usually has the sockets on the side, the ISO4 has them all on the rear. This can hamper your ability to place the isolator exactly where you might prefer in some booths, in front of the mixer perhaps. But overall, I'd rather have the ability to connect it in the way I'd like, even if it means positioning is a bit more fiddly. I do think Mastersounds have missed a trick by not also releasing a bracket to allow you to mount the ISO4 so it hangs off the front of a desktop, in the way that Louis Vega usually has his isolator. I'd like to see them drop something like that, and I think it would do well. Power supply is an external DC plug and comes with different adapters for worldwide use, so the ISO4 will be easy to travel with. Moving on, the construction is typical Mastersounds. All metal build, solid connections, and a great feel to the metal pots which are bolted to the faceplate. Zero complaints from me. The only slight issue I have is that, as there's not a whole lot in it, the ISO4 is still very light despite the metal build, and the rubber feet they provide aren't especially soft and grippy, so on smoother surfaces I found the ISO4 to be a bit easy to slide around by accident. You might even see it in the demo parts of this video. That's easily fixed by adding some stickier pads of your own, but I'd love to see them use a softer compound for those feet out of the factory. We come to the all-important sound then, and they're the ISO4 Excels. Mastersounds list the cutoff points on their website, and I'll put them on the screen for you here. Each band in both modes offers full kill and a plus 7 dB boost, which is enough to give things a good kick, but not enough to make sound engineers start pulling their hair out. Some folks who like a really aggressive isolator might be wanting more, but for me, it's a sweet spot. You can hear the ISO4 in action during this video, but I will say that it's hard to really get the difference that having that fourth band for the sub makes without hearing the ISO4 on a big system with actual subwoofers. As a side note, I think that's a big part of why the sets of DJs like Joe Clawsell often don't really translate when you're watching them on YouTube. Without that physical movement of air created when cutting and boosting the bass on a big system, a lot of what makes an isolator so powerful is lost. I actually found myself mostly running the ISO4 in 3-band mode in the studio and 4-band mode when out and about, just to really get the most out of it. But that's the beauty of that design, of course, you can choose between both. One thing to point out is that you won't want to be switching modes a lot on the fly, as there can be a bit of a popping sound when the button is pushed. This is the nature of the beast with analog kit, unfortunately, and it's not especially onerous, but it's something to be aware of. It's the same situation on the Radius 4 Mark II with the same isolator setup, so it's not specific to my ISO4 review unit. As for the sound quality itself, well, I did quite a lot of testing. I was interested in seeing if, due to the analog nature of the ISO4, it might somehow add some extra warmth to whatever you run through it. So as well as analog mixers, I also tried it with digital kit like the DJMS11 and even the budget Numark Mixstream Pro Go. And my conclusion was that, no. The ISO4 doesn't actually have any impact on the sound whatsoever. It is completely transparent. Which, let's be clear, is actually a very good thing. If you've spent a lot of money on a high quality mixer, you don't want the ISO4 to impart any kind of different flavour to the sound when it's used as an insert or added later in the chain. Clearly that transparency is what Mastersounds have aimed for, and they've achieved it. But if you were hoping to somehow cheat code getting better sound out of average gear, then no, the ISO4 won't do that for you. Finally, let's talk price. The ISO4 sells for $561 or £525 sterling. That puts it a little higher than both the Beatsource and MC Audio Solutions alternatives, but neither of those offer balanced connections or the 4-way option. When you also consider rack isolators, you can pay a lot more, and there's nothing cheaper besides the Omnitronic. So I think the value is there with the Mastersounds. Is it an essential purchase for anyone? No, not really. The vast majority of modern mixers have per-channel EQs, and most contemporary rotaries have some form of isolator on board already, although the extra 4-band mode on the ISO4 could be a nice addition for some. But I just really love having an isolator at my fingertips during a set. I can treat it like a tool, shaping the sound in the room, or I can use it as a performance piece, as if it's an effect. And with the ISO4 being so portable and having the flexibility to work with any gear I encounter on my travels, that makes it an absolute winner for me. So there you go, my thoughts on the ISO4 from Mastersounds. It's a really fun addition to pretty much any DJ setup, thanks to the flexibility of the connections on there, which definitely gives it an advantage over its closest competition. Having the XLRs on board just lets it connect in some potentially more useful ways. It's built extremely well and the sound quality is great. As I say, don't expect it to bestow some magical analog warmth onto your gear, but the very transparent nature of the ISO4 means it won't have any negative impact on your signal chain either. When it comes to performance, I think they've chosen very musical cutoff points, and that 7 dB boost is enough to crank things nicely without being too dangerous. In the comments this week, let us know about your experiences with isolators, either separate or on mixers. Which ones have you tried and loved or disliked? I, for example, got to use a dope reel out in Arizona a few years back, and whilst it was super aggressive, it was also quite magical at the same time. And who is the DJ who most inspires you when it comes to how they use an isolator? Sound off in those comments below. Thank you for watching this episode of Beatsource Tech. I do hope you've enjoyed it or found it useful. If you have, please give the video a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed to the channel too. We recently went past 200,000 subs and I'd love to hit that 250,000 mark soon. I'll see you next time.